You're in the temple of the rant, where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by becoming one of those. This one's for John, who says, please rant about the career of Akira Toriyama and his contributions to manga with Dr. Slump, video games with Chrono Trigger, and anime with the Dragon Ball franchise. Please assess each of these contributions for better or for worse. Well, I haven't read or seen any of Dr. Slump. I, of course, grew up with Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z in particular on TV as a kid. I read Sandland because they had that running, the little one volume thing he did in weekly or monthly Shonen Jump when it came to America. And of course I've played Chrono Trigger and stuff. I mean, I think that Toriyama's art style is fantastic. It's extremely distinctive, obviously a huge influence on tons of people. When you really go back and look at like the stuff that was coming out in the 80s, it feels like the styles that would eventually come to define anime, it's like they came out of nowhere. Because while on the one hand, you know, if you were to look at Astro Boy or something, you won't think it's like a huge leap to imagine that eventually became the design styles that we have today. Actually, just like looking at a wall of like every show that came out, you know, I can't say as much about older manga because I'm not as experienced, but when I look at older anime, Dragon Ball doesn't look like the stuff that was coming out at the time. It's not like this was the look of anime. Dragon Ball is the reason that became the look of anime. It's the reason that all of those other stories, like when I was reading Shonen Jump, when they started publishing it here, there was a lot of interviews and stuff with like the manga creators who worked on these stories. A lot of these are included in the full volumes that you can buy. And everybody was influenced by Dragon Ball Z. You know, if you read about Eiichiro Oda, who created One Piece, like, he outright is like, Dragon Ball is my biggest influence. I worship Dragon Ball, you know? In the same way that if you read Bakuman, the character who's sort of supposed to be the Eiichiro Oda of the series, for him it's Bleach, you know? But, like, he has a similar relationship with Bleach as to what Oda has to Dragon Ball, I think. And then, you know, you read Masashi Kishimoto talking about Naruto, and it's like his influences are like the art style of Akira and Dragon Ball. It's like these people came up reading Dragon Ball, so when they developed their own art styles, like, I don't know about you guys, but when I was in elementary school, kids were always tracing DBZ characters out of books. I did it too, a little bit, you know, like, people would get like a Dragon Ball Z magazine and they just sit there and trace all the characters, and then they learn to draw that way, and like all the kids I knew like were eventually going to develop an art style like Dragon Ball Z. It's, you know, it's that angular, very like hyper masculine, turbo, like badass, but still like cartoony in a way that, like, say Fist of the North Star isn't, you know, where like those sort of uber masculine characters were like too adult, too threatening to like a younger audience. Dragon Ball is like, you look at Goku and, you know, especially in the original, like as a kid, you immediately can connect with that character because he's kind of wacky, he's cartoony, he's funny looking, but, you know, when he takes his shirt off and he's fucking bulging with muscles and he blasts a Kamehameha and you're like, holy fuck, this is awesome, you know? And then age up those characters and they still look cartoony enough that they, you know, are not scary to a kid in the way that, like, when I think of Kenshiro, it's like he's a daunting figure, you know? So I think that Toriyama just basically found a way to make masculinity, like hyper-masculine, adult masculinity, like something that was kid-friendly enough that young boys are going to latch onto it, because most young boys are looking for role models in their media. They're looking for people who they can want to be like, and it has to be in a very simplistic way for them to understand it. You know, they're not looking for a super nuanced character who they can, you know, project onto, because they're not going to understand that nuance. They want to be like someone who's a good guy, who's big and strong, and who's, you know, who's gonna fight to defend people. And like, we have stuff like Superman and Batman here in the West, and even those characters they're more adult. They're more, they're not as cartoony. You get Goku, goofy looking fuckboy, and he can appeal to, an even younger audience on an even deeper level, I think. So, yeah, I think that has a lot to do with why Toriyama's style is so popular, and I think that people just tracing it literally as the way that they got their start drawing as a singular digit child, is why their art styles end up developing from there, and there's going to be some element of looking like that, So, yeah, I would say that he's unfucking believably influential especially in the world of shonen. That like, if you start with Dragon Ball as an origin point and look at shonen, it looks like everything came from there. Even more so than it looks like everything came from any other older manga from someone like Tezuka. So yeah, I would say unparalleled influence worldwide too. Like the fact that what we consider to be the look of anime all over the world is basically the Dragon Ball Z, the spiky hair and big eyes. It's like, that's Toriyama, Not to say that he's the only person who did it, or necessarily the first, but by far the most influential. As for games like Chrono Trigger, and of course Dragon Quest, she also did the designs for. I don't know if those are as influential, because I don't feel like there's a ton of games that have copied the style of Chrono Trigger or Dragon's Quest. I think it's really the masculinity of Dragon Ball that made it so resonant with young boys around the world. Yeah, pretty good fucking artist.